The day I entered that doctor's office changed my life forever. It wasn't the modern equipment or the characteristic smell of the hospital that impressed me, but rather that penetrating gaze that made my body tremble. My name is David Johnson. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a software engineer in Boston. After my divorce, I threw myself into remote work, seeking a fresh start in this bustling city. My life was predictable and organized, every hour of the day meticulously planned, until that moment when Dr. Bennett walked into the consultation room. My apartment in downtown Boston had become my private refuge. From the 12th floor, I watched the harbor while sipping my breakfast coffee. The makeshift office in the living room allows me to work with a view of the sea, where seagulls dance between the skyscrapers. Mornings start early, when the city is still waking up. The aroma of fresh coffee mingles with the sea breeze coming through the window. Amidst code and online meetings, I find peace in this solitary routine, watching the ships come and go from the harbor, carrying their secrets across the ocean. It was just another routine appointment, one of those we do out of obligation. In the waiting room, I absent-mindedly flipped through a magazine while waiting to be called. The sterile and quiet environment was only broken by the typing of the receptionist and the muffled sound of voices coming from the examination rooms. "Mr. Johnson," the nurse called, guiding me to room 203. "Dr. Bennett will see you shortly." I sat in the leather chair, observing the diplomas on the wall. When the door opened, Dr. Ethan Bennett entered with a warm smile that lit up his green eyes. Tall, athletic build, with gray hair at his temples giving him a distinguished air. His deep voice filled the room. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Johnson?" As I answered the routine questions, I noticed something different in the air. Every time our eyes met, an electric current seemed to run down my spine. During the physical exam, his fingers brushed against my neck to check my pulse. That touch, seemingly professional, awakened sensations I hadn't felt in a long time. The cold stethoscope against my chest contrasted with the warmth radiating from his proximity. I noticed my heartbeat quickening. And by the way he hesitated for a moment, I'm sure he noticed it too. "Your blood pressure is a bit elevated," he commented, his eyes meeting mine for a moment longer than necessary. I tried to maintain my composure, but my mind was already wandering into dangerous territories. The appointment continued, each moment laden with a silent tension that neither of us dared to acknowledge. At the end, when he extended his hand to say goodbye, I felt a slight additional pressure in his fingers, a touch that lasted a fraction of a second longer than protocol. Or was it just my imagination? I left the office dazed, questioning every moment, every glance, every word. That routine appointment had transformed into something much more complex. In the elevator, I found myself mentally replaying every detail of the encounter, trying to decipher whether that inexplicable chemistry was real or just a product of my longing. After that intense appointment, I started frequenting the cafe near the clinic. I told myself it was for the quality of the specialty coffee. But deep down, I hoped to run into him there. On the third morning, my heart raced when I saw him walk in, wearing a casual gray sweater that made him even more attractive than the white coat. Our eyes met, and he came over to my table with a warm smile. "What a pleasant surprise, Mr. Johnson. May I join you?" "David, please," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair. The conversation flowed naturally. We discovered a shared love for books. He played the cello in his spare time. His eyes sparkled as we discussed classic literature, and his passion for Hemingway rivaled mine. Our meetings at the cafe became frequent, always maintaining a casual appearance. Sometimes we would walk together in the nearby park, talking about our lives. Ethan, as I came to call him outside the office, revealed his fascination with medicine from a young age and his love for jazz on Sundays. On one of these occasions, while discussing The Old Man and the Sea, our fingers brushed as we reached for the sugar bowl simultaneously. The brief contact sent shivers through my body, and I noticed his breath falter for a moment. The tension between us grew with each meeting, masked by conversations about art and music. Each exchanged smile, each prolonged glance, each casual meeting only heightened the electricity in the air. We maintained a delicate dance between the professional and the personal, knowing we were approaching a dangerous line. Every night lying in my bed, my thoughts wandered to Ethan. Guilt consumed me for desiring my doctor, someone who should maintain a strictly professional relationship with me. I questioned whether I was misinterpreting his gestures, whether I was projecting my desires onto simple acts of courtesy. During our encounters, I noticed his internal conflict as well. Sometimes he would subtly pull away when we got too close, Other times his eyes would search for mine with an intensity that took my breath away. At certain moments, he would mention his ethical duties as a doctor, although his tone betrayed an evident regret. One afternoon in the cafe, a nurse from the clinic walked in. Ethan immediately straightened in his chair, our intimate conversation transforming into a formal discussion about the weather. That moment crystallized our complex reality. We were two men caught between desire and social conventions. The weight of this forbidden attraction began to affect my sleep, my work. Each casual meeting became a sweet torture, an exercise in self-control that tested my limits. It was on a rainy autumn night that everything changed. I was leaving work when the storm began. Without an umbrella, I ran to take shelter in the entrance of an old building. To my surprise, it was the building where Ethan lived. He had casually mentioned the address in one of our conversations. As I watched the violent rain, I heard footsteps approaching. Ethan was coming back from work, his hair slightly damp, a few drops running down his face. Our eyes met, and time seemed to freeze. "You're soaked," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Come up with me. You can dry off and wait for the rain to pass." In the elevator, the silence was deafening. We could hear our breaths, the air thick with anticipation. His apartment was stylish and cozy, with large windows showcasing the storm-lit city. "I'll get a towel," he murmured, leaving me alone in the living room. I noticed the sheet music on the piano, the books carefully organized on the shelves. Everything there screamed Ethan. When he returned, our fingers brushed while exchanging the towel. This time, neither of us pulled back. His touch traveled up my arm, sending waves of electricity throughout my body. The rain pounded furiously against the windows as if echoing the storm inside us. "David," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "This is." "I know," I replied, taking a step toward him. Our mouths met with years of repressed desire. His strong hands held my face as we deepened the kiss. The taste of coffee on his lips, the soft scent of his skin. Everything was intoxicating. My hands explored his back, feeling the tense muscles beneath his dress shirt. A loud thunderclap temporarily separated us. Breathless, we leaned our foreheads together. His green eyes were dark with desire. But I also saw vulnerability there. "I can't fight this anymore," he confessed, his fingers tracing my face as if he wanted to memorize every detail. I tried to keep my distance, to be professional, but you changed everything. The rain continued its symphony outside as we lost ourselves in each other. Every touch, every kiss, every sigh carried months of accumulated tension. Our clothes found their way to the living room floor, and our bodies met with urgency and tenderness. There, amidst shadows and lightning, we discovered so much more than physical desire in each other. It was a deep connection, a mutual understanding that transcended the barriers we had built. His kisses were both a confession and a promise. When the storm finally subsided, we remained entwined on the sofa, covered only by a soft blanket. The silence was now comfortable, filled only by the sound of our synchronized breaths and the distant dripping of the rain. "There's no going back after this," he murmured against my neck. "I don't want to go back," I replied, pulling him closer. Ethan's room was a sanctuary of dimness and warmth. The city lights softly filtered through the windows, creating dancing shadows on our skin. Every touch was a discovery, every sigh a new language we learned together. His hands, accustomed to medical precision, now explored my body with a mix of reverence and desire. His fingers traced invisible maps on my skin, discovering sensitive spots I didn't even know I had. Each caress was preceded by a look of silent permission, each movement a mute question I answered with sighs and gasps. "You're beautiful," he whispered against my skin, his lips leaving a trail of fire on my neck. His words, spoken with such sincerity, made my heart race even more. Our bodies moved in perfect sync, as if we had rehearsed this dance our whole lives. The air was charged with electricity, each breath deeper than the last. The outside world ceased to exist. We were just the two of us, lost in each other, discovering new universes in the space between our bodies. Ethan alternated between moments of intense passion and surprising tenderness. His strong hands held me firmly, but his kisses were soft as feathers. When our eyes met, I saw in them a mix of burning desire and touching vulnerability. "Are you sure?" he asked in a moment of pause, his green eyes searching for mine in the dim light. My answer was to pull him in for another deep kiss, my hands exploring the curves of his muscles, feeling his heart beating against mine. Our bodies fit together perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle finally united. The climax hit us like a wave. gradually growing until it swept us completely away. We uttered each other's names like prayers, our voices blending with the distant sound of the city outside. For a moment, time stood still. We were eternal in that instant of shared ecstasy. Then, lying side by side, our bodies still trembling slightly, Ethan traced lazy patterns on my skin with his fingers. The silence between us was comfortable, filled only by our breaths gradually returning to normal. I've never felt anything like this, he confessed, his voice hoarse with emotion. It's like all this time I've been waiting for you without knowing it. I turned to look at him, admiring how the nightlight highlighted the angles of his face. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that touched me deeply. This man, always so controlled and professional, was now completely exposed before me, not just physically but emotionally. I feel the same, I replied, pulling him closer, our bodies entwined naturally, as if they were made for this. There, sheltered by darkness and each other's warmth, we whispered confessions and promises. Each word was a brick in the construction of something new and precious between us. Tomorrow, with all its complications and challenges, could wait. At that moment, we were just two hearts beating in the same rhythm, two souls finally finding their match. The dawn found us still entwined, the soft light of the rising sun painting golden shadows on our bodies. Reality began to slowly seep into our bubble of intimacy when Ethan's cell phone alarm went off, announcing another workday. I watched him get dressed, each deliberate movement revealing the tension that was starting to accumulate on his shoulders. Dr. Bennett's mask was gradually returning, but his eyes, when they met mine, still carried the warmth of the previous night. I need to transfer you to another doctor, he finally said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I can no longer be your doctor after this. It would be unethical. I nodded, understanding the complexity of our situation. There's an excellent colleague, Dr. Martinez, he continued. I can make the recommendation. Breakfast was a delicate dance between intimacy and formality. We shared toast and coffee while discussing the practical aspects of our new reality. How would we keep this discreet? How would we navigate the social circles that inevitably overlapped? My professional reputation, he began hesitantly. If this becomes public, I understand, I gently interrupted. We can be discreet, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. But we both knew everything had already changed. The way his fingers brushed mine while passing the butter, how his eyes followed my movements. There was no going back to what we were before. In the elevator, heading down to face the world, Ethan held my hand briefly. I don't regret it, he whispered, but I need time to adjust, to find a balance. The following weeks were an exercise in patience and self-discovery. Our meetings at the cafe continued, but now they were loaded with new meaning. Every shared glance told a story only we knew. We developed a silent code of gestures and expressions, a secret language of clandestine lovers. Ethan began to open up more about his fears. The fear of losing the respect of his colleagues, of tarnishing a career built so carefully. I shared my own insecurities about being a secret, about living in the shadows of his public life. But there were also moments of pure joy. Nights when he played the cello just for me. Lazy mornings with Bach in the background and coffee in bed. We discovered that love, even complicated, had its own rhythm, its own music. Gradually, we established new boundaries and possibilities. Discreet meetings in neighboring cities. Dinners in restaurants where we wouldn't be recognized. Every stolen moment was more precious because of its rarity. This is not temporary for me, he confessed one night as we watched the city from his balcony. I know it's complicated, that I'm asking a lot with all this discretion. Love is rarely simple, I replied, intertwining our fingers, but sometimes the most complex things are the ones worth the most. The truth was that our night of passion had transformed into something deeper, more enduring. The initial desire had evolved into a mutual understanding, a silent commitment to face the challenges that would come together. 6 months had passed since that stormy night. Our relationship had deepened but also become more complex. On a Sunday afternoon, sitting in his apartment with a half-empty bottle of wine, Ethan held my hands with a seriousness that made my heart tighten. I received an invitation to head the neurology department in Seattle, he said, his green eyes studying my reaction. It's a unique opportunity, but it means leaving all of this behind. The silence that followed was heavy with all the unspoken words. Seattle was thousands of miles away. A new life, a new beginning for him. For us, you deserve this opportunity, I finally replied, trying to keep my voice steady. It's the recognition for all your work. Ethan got up, walking to the window. The setting sun painted his profile in golden tones, reminding me of that first morning together. I don't want to go without you, he said, his voice almost a whisper. But I also can't ask you to abandon your life here. It was the crossroads we always knew would come, the moment when our love would have to be strong enough to survive the distance or brave enough to take a leap into the unknown. What if I did? The words escaped before I could hold them back. What if we started over together? He turned, surprise and hope mixed in his gaze. David, would you consider that? Leaving everything? My job can be done from anywhere. And Boston has a vibrant art scene. I moved closer to him, touching his face, but more importantly, it has you. Tears shimmered in his eyes. In Seattle, we could be ourselves. No hiding, no pretending. I could introduce you as my partner. Not just a friend. The prospect of a life in the open, without shadows or secrets, was tempting. I imagined us walking hand in hand through the public garden, dining in restaurants without fear of being seen, building a home together. It won't be easy, he warned, always the pragmatic one, starting over in a new city, building new connections. Love never promised to be easy, I replied, repeating our words from months ago. But you are worth every challenge. We kissed then, a kiss that carried promises of the future. When we pulled away, there was a new light in Ethan's eyes, a certainty that hadn't been there before. I'm going to accept the position, he declared, and we're going to do this together. No more hidden meetings, no more secrets, a real, complete life. In the following months, we prepared for our move. Every decision, from choosing the apartment to the furniture we would take, was made together. It was strange and wonderful to plan a shared future so openly. On the night before our departure, we returned to that same cafe where it all began. The place was nearly empty, the soft light creating an intimate atmosphere. Are you sure? He asked one last time, his fingers intertwined with mine. I looked at our joined hands, at the man who had transformed my life, and smiled. I have never been so sure of anything in my life. Love, we discovered, sometimes requires us to leave everything behind to find something even greater. In Seattle, a new story awaited us. Our story finally free to be told. Today, watching the snow gently fall on the streets of Seattle through the window of our apartment, I reflect on the journey that brought us here. Ethan is in the kitchen making hot chocolate, completely at ease in our shared space. The sound of his laughter, carefree and untroubled, still makes my heart leap like it did on the first day. Our story is not just about love, it is about courage. The courage to recognize that sometimes what we fear most is exactly what we need the most. It is about taking a leap of faith when everything we know tells us to stay safe on solid ground. The love between a doctor and his patient was supposedly forbidden, a taboo that was meant to remain unspoken. But true love knows no artificial boundaries. It overflows, transcends, and transforms. It forces us to question the rules we accept without thinking, the barriers we build around our hearts. For those who still hesitate on the brink of their own love story, who wonder if it's worth risking everything for a feeling. Yes, it is worth it. Authentic love does not ask for permission to exist, it simply is. And when we find that person who makes our world spin on a new axis, we need to have the courage to follow that call. Ethan is now one of the most respected neurologists in Seattle, and I have found my place in the vibrant artistic community of the city. But our greatest achievement is not in our careers, it is in the life we have built together. In the small daily joys we share openly. If you are reading this and recognize in yourself the desire for something deeper, something true, do not wait for the perfect storm, create your own storm. Break the rules that do not serve love. Be brave enough to admit your feelings, to take that first step toward the happiness you deserve. Because in the end, we do not regret the chances we take in the name of love, we regret the chances we let slip away. True love, in all its forms, deserves to be lived fully, celebrated openly, and fiercely defended. Be your own love story. The world needs more brave hearts willing to fight for what they feel.